The Chinese economy is flexing its biggest muscle once again. After years of decline, China's manufacturing sector is showing signs of a return to form.
There was a rebound in March. Even if some seasonal factors weren't included, the rebound in March is still obvious. So there's a solid basis for the trend of steady economic performance.
The Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing has risen to an 8-month high of 50.5, beating analyst expectations. Any score above 50 indicates expansion. Data shows factories have started hiring again for the first time in more than 5 years. The report also shows new orders were up for the second consecutive month. Companies credit a reduction in value-added tax last year. The government's cutting taxes again this year, which should give the industry even more momentum.
The VAT rate has been lowered by 3 more percentage points, and our company will benefit. Based on last year's sales revenue and considering the factors such as input, our tax burden will be reduced by about $1 million.
The sector could receive an even bigger boost if China and the US can reach an agreement on tariffs. Chinese trade officials will meet with their American counterparts in Washington this week, with both sides saying they've made progress towards a final deal. For Chinese factories, an end to the trade war with the US would ease a heavy load. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
For more on China's factory comeback, let's go to Jeffrey Tucker in Atlanta. He's the editorial director of the American Institute for Economic Research. Welcome back to the program, Jeffrey. There's been a lot of excitement, particularly on stock markets, about this surprise jump in Chinese factory activity. What do you think the new data says about how China is coping with this slowdown that's been setting in there, as well as the US-China trade war?
I think it suggests that China is coping very well with the trade war, much better than the US is. I think there's no question what China wants going into these negotiations, which is a resuming of normal trade relationships and a dramatic reduction in these tariffs that were imposed a little more than a year ago. Whether they're going to get it is not at all clear to me. The negotiators on the US side are really divided. On one hand, you want people who genuinely want a deal. On the other hand, there's the problem that the president himself is a strong believer in tariffs and thinks that the tariffs have been productive and good for the U.S. economy. So this is a serious problem going into these negotiations, and I'm afraid that everybody is still in denial about this problem. So I'm less and less optimistic that we can get a deal, actually.
I'd like to talk more about those trade negotiations just in a moment. But first, there's also been some positive figures coming out of the United States in terms of their manufacturing activity. It shows a rebound in March from its lowest level in more than 2 years. What do you think is behind the jump where you are?
I think we're still benefiting to some extent from the reduction of the corporate tax rates and from some of the deregulatory efforts of 2019. And that's still being felt, but not all economic signs in the US are looking very good. The tariffs have been very costly to the US. The housing market is not looking good. Retail sales are not as impressive as you might hope they would be. So like right now, the best thing that could happen to the US economy is a trade deal with China. I mean, this would be an extraordinary boost to U.S. economic activity if we could just get the deal. But the problem, again, is that the U.S. president is not convinced of this, and he's proven to be kind of impervious to empirical logic, to both reality, empirical reality, and the logic of the situation. I don't know if you heard his speech in Michigan 2 or 3 days ago. He gave a speech in which he went on and on and on about the glory of tariffs and how great it's been for the U.S. economy, despite the factory shutdowns, despite the constant complaints by everybody. It's been very costly. He doesn't want to see this reality. So this is a problem as we're going into the negotiations. It's a question of how sincere is the U.S.? And I think Chinese negotiators have long ago given up this idea that they can really trust that the U.S. wants an end. to this trade struggles.
Interesting. Despite what Donald Trump has said recently, as you say, he seems to have toned down on his threats to really ramp up the trade war, his threats to make it a full-scale trade war with China. Why do you think he's toned down those threats? Or does he think that China is perhaps making genuine efforts to meet his demands?
No, I don't think that's it, because they're talking at cross purposes on a whole range of subjects like industrial subsidies and intellectual property, and I don't know that we've made much progress here at all. I think that Trump has gotten just slightly scared of the economic impact of these tariffs and how that's going to harm his re-election prospects, and that is very good. I mean, I'm so glad that he's rolled back this rhetoric or the intentions just a little bit, but the problem is these aluminum steel tariffs and these other tariffs that he's placed on China. Like, I'm very doubtful that he really has any intention of getting rid of these things, because he's like I think the world should know by now that he's a kind of a convinced believer in some limited forms of mercantilist protectionism. So I don't think that China has much hope of getting rid of this. At this point, I think the best hope we have is to not get a worse situation. As for a deal, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not convinced that we're going to get anything that's going to excite the markets too much. But we have to wait and see, and really ultimately hope that cooler heads within the U.S. administration prevail.
And so it sounds like that you think he perhaps has bigger fish to fry in terms of his domestic agenda. What is the president currently preoccupied with?
Well, unfortunately, he's preoccupied with defending his trade tariffs, and also getting back at his domestic political enemies for this Russia conspiracy theory that have been floating around for 2 years. So in many ways, he's very strong politically right now. The only thing that it could really hurt him is a dramatic turn down in the economic environment. What could really help him politically would be a deal with China. He surely knows that, and I think that that's where we have to place unfortunately, that's where we have to place our hopes, not on the economic realities, not on the logic of the situation, but rather on the U.S. president wanting to do something that would help him politically. So at least we have that much.